Hello there, Alan Plum here again with a little more from Shed Engineering and our N-gauge folding model railway, and a scene of total devastation apart from down this end where things are starting to take shape. And in this video I'm going to show how I made the lift out section on the left hand side there, the bright green section, so I can access the track just there. So we now need a lift out section of scenery to go down this back side. I've got some points just there and obviously need to access the track. As you can see, I've put some small battens on the backboard to support the scenery, and also a small batten on the divider there. So this is the lift out section, simply made out of cardboard using a hot glue gun. I have put a piece of plywood along the front edge. That'll be locating it and taking the weight, and I didn't want that to wear away. Lots of little triangles down the back to keep that at the right angle, and so that's ready for putting in place and filling with foam. So once we're happy with the fit, it's a matter of masking off the surrounding areas so we don't glue it in with the expanding foam. After 5, 6, 7 minutes, the foam develops a skin and stops being quite so sticky, and here I've put a carrier bag over the top to try and smooth the foam out and reduce the amount of sanding. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was totally successful, but it did actually help a little bit. So now the moment of truth to see whether it'll actually come out, and the masking has done its job. That can be pulled away and we can start to shape it down and try and make it into a field. We just had one little bit of a leakage onto the inside, and once I'd cut that away, it was good and strong obviously, but very light, and she fitted back into place nicely. Here I'm doing the next section further along. This isn't going to be removable. This is going to act as support and help keep everything rigid, so it's going to be a spanning piece from the backboard arching over to the middle of the box or the middle of the layout. Just gluing some cardboard in place with the hot glue gun. And while expanding foam isn't the easiest material to work with by any means, it's not rocket science to fill a piece in like this and apply the foam. Time-wise, I think it's very cost effective. As far as the price goes, these cans are costing £5 from Travers Perkins, and the obvious strength that you get, I think is it's very reasonable. Don't know how long a section like this would take using chicken wire and plaster cloth. I think time-wise it'd be a lot longer, because this section here probably only took 15-20 minutes in total, and that includes cutting the cardboard to a reasonably close fit so you don't get any leaks. So as you can see, I've got everything roughly shaped down. I was actually hoping that I would be able to sand the foam and it be a finished surface more or less. But as you can see, there's a lot of air bubbles in it, and so I've got to apply some kind of filler. My main concern is that with it being such a flimsy design, a semi-mobile folding, it's going to obviously twist. So my main concern is trying to have something flexible. If I was using plaster cloth, I'm absolutely certain it would crack in no time. So here I've mixed up some wood shavings. I bought that just as I think it's like hamster bedding. So it's wood shavings, a good amount of PVA glue, and some household filler, polyfiller. If it did crack, I don't want it to particularly show. So as you can see, I've added just a basic green so that it'll be coloured all the way through. I think that might help if I'm drilling holes as well. As you can see, I'm applying a good thick layer. It must be at least 3/8 of an inch thick. The rough surface is hopefully working to my advantage in giving a good key. I'm using an artist palette knife to press the filler down into the surface. It's actually very, very workable. If this was polyfiller, I'm sure you wouldn't be able to get such a neat edge down to the road and make sort of a grass verge. The major disappointment was the actual texture. It is far, far too rough for N scale. You don't get lush pasture up in the hills. It's a much coarser, tussocky, rough pasture. So I wanted quite a rough texture, but this is I was very disappointed. This is far too rough. But as far as the workability goes, working along the edge of the road like this, I couldn't fault it. It works very well. I just hope it's flexible enough not to crack. Because of the rough texture, here I'm applying some just household filler. I've added some black in it so that you can see a difference, and so I'm going over the top while it's still wet, obviously, in the hope that I can get a smoother texture. And while it's working to some extent, and I don't mind the odd piece sticking up, odd bit sticking up would represent tussocks of grass and thistles and things like that, I still think it's a little bit coarse. I don't mind the odd little piece sticking up. I can remember in this field near the trees there, that's where my dad took us train spotting when we lived in Sheffield, and I can always remember that field being absolutely full of thistles and cowpats. And so any of these fibres that are sticking up would represent something like thistles, or perhaps rosebay willow herb or something like that, that's quite tall. One of the problems I've been having is that to try and shape this down, I've been just using a kitchen knife, which is alright on external curves, but when you start to get into somewhere like this, it's much more difficult. And also when you're doing something like this on a flat field. So what I've actually started using is an egg ring for cooking eggs in a frying pan to keep the fried egg together. That's the best I've been able to come up with at the moment. And I've sharpened the bottom edge so that can be now, it could do with being a lot sharper. This is the lift out section we did earlier with the filler applied that is made out of hamster bedding. After it had dried for a day or so, I tried laying a carrier bag across it and smoothing it down. That did help, but it needs further attention. It either needs a smoother filler like I did earlier, or I might try some grass scatter to see what that's like. As you can see, I've got the initial carving done on the embankments coming away from the tunnel. My next job was to put filler on this middle field. As you can see, there's a lot of air bubbles in there. Very disappointed in that respect. I've got to use the foam for strength and flexibility, but I was honestly hoping that I could just sand it down, use PVA glue and grass scatter. Obviously, being a complete beginner, a lot of what I'm doing is just experimental. And being on a tight budget, I'm just trying to use what I have to hand, or with these examples, making the best of the expanding foam, which is already paid for. So that's basically how the bushes and trees came about. Why go to the trouble of shaping and sanding down the foam, and then applying filler or plaster, and then applying some boulders and stones? If you can just paint the foam to get the boulder or rocky scree area, surely that's got to be a lot more cost effective. Or simply put cuts or score marks into the foam to create like a sedimentary layer, like in a slate quarry or something like that. And so that's what I'm experimenting with here. I've just put the score marks in, quickly painted over it. And even though it's a little bit shiny, you get quite a nice effect, and I'm sure that could soon become a quarry face. So it's the same again here. waste not, want not, as they say. This is just leftover foam from shaping down the landscape, broken up into little sort of fingernail size pieces. Then we're adding some ordinary household filler, some PVA glue, a bit of black paint, a drop of water, and give that a jolly good mix in. I applied it to a cardboard former and it literally took a few minutes. To do that in plaster or anything else and get that amount of texture, I think would take a lot of doing. So I think that's got quite a few options, and it dried very nicely. With a bit of extra painting, I'm sure that's got a lot of potential. So this next experiment is general purpose potting compost, the type you'd get outside B&Q. A bit of PVA glue, some polyfiller, so it makes it go a lot further. Give that a good mixing and you ended up with quite a spreadable mixture. Should have put some green in it. So rather than the smooth plaster type finish, you've got a nice texture to it. So there you've got a perfect slag heap. And it dried nicely. Not to a really hard, crisp filler like you'd get polyfiller. It was more of a crumbly type consistency, but perfectly strong enough that on a substrate like that I'd have no hesitation in using it. Here I'm just showing the mixing bowl that I left from the other night, where I mixed the hamster bedding, the shavings, with some polyfiller and PVA glue, and that has dried really hard. To say that's a plastic bucket, I'm surprised how nicely that's dried. So this is the next experiment with the wood shavings. I think it's sold as hamster bedding, something like that. But that bright green field was far too coarse, so I've whacked this through the food processor. I thought it might get finer than that. Whack that through the food processor. Perhaps I should use ordinary sawdust. Probably got about 3 cupfuls of shavings, a cupful of polyfiller, so again it makes the polyfiller go a long way, a good helping of PVA glue, and then again I like the idea of it being self-coloured, so we're adding a little bit of black emulsion paint, a bit of green emulsion paint, and again that will also help it all stick together as well, so that's acting as an adhesive as well. Mix that up, and so you end up with this paste almost, and it's quite nice to work with in actual fact. So there I'm working it into all them air bubbles you will have seen earlier. Again, I'm hoping that that'll act as a key and give a good bond. As you can see, it must be going on at least 1/4 of an inch thick. I've given the whole area a coat of PVA to start with. Again, I'm using a artist's palette knife, which is very handy. Now, if I was using plaster or polyfiller, I'm sure it would be very difficult to get a nice clean edge to this grass verge, but with the shavings in, you end up with quite a dry mixture almost. And like there, I can just roll that back off the road, and it hasn't stuck or damaged it. So if you was working up close to a building or a bridge parapet or something like that, I'm sure you could get a quite nice effect. And again here, look, I don't think you could do that with polyfiller, and then just bring it in and press it into the foam, and again you're getting a incredibly neat edge to the verge. Here I'm working right up against the track. I feel so confident that there's no need to mask the track, and I can spoon dollops of this mixture on. It's almost like a clean filler, and because it's a stiff paste, you can actually sort of press it into position. Now what I'm attempting to do here, I'm thinking that there's going to be a fence along this section, obviously, and that perhaps the grass has grown up longer along the fence line, and so I'm trying to create that kind of detail, even though we might go over it with some scatter and create different colours and get rid of some of the coarser texture. I can go along the mixture, and because, as I say, that it's quite stiff, I can start to incorporate some detail. I've probably got it far too big. I'm not used to the scale. That's probably far too big in actual fact. But there you can see how workable it is, and how clean it is. And again, along by the plywood there along the back, I'm working right up to that. And again, if you're working up to a building or something like that, I think you could get a nice clean edge to it. And there you can see an example of the much coarser wood shavings that haven't been through the blender. Now on this next experiment, again it's textured painting. I'm using some paint with a good dollop of PVA glue, and then I've raided the spice rack, and I've got some dried parsley and some dried sage mixed in to make what amounts to a paste. I should have perhaps used some different colours as I were going along. This green is a little bit vivid. It needs toning down a bit, but it's almost like Artex, so you can soon stipple it and change the colours when you've got a bit more time. As you can see there, it's quite a thick paste. I'm having trouble because I'm leaning over, trying to keep out of the way of the camera, so I can hardly see what I'm doing round the bottom there. But with a little bit of time and patience, I think you get quite a reasonable effect. You can adjust the height and sort of actually change the shape and gradually build it up. So that's another possibility. In fact, it turned out so well, it makes my first attempt at painting trees look quite rubbish. So I think I better set about having a repaint, which I'll try and show next time. We'll try turning decorator's cork into hedges. And we'll try turning this into this. I hope you've found something of interest, and I'm sure you can add your own ideas and twists to come up with even more easy to make and easy to use textured coatings. Many thanks to all the new subscribers as well, and as usual, many thanks for watching.